Welcome to Kicking Your Teen's Troubles to the Curb with host Christina Nation, the ultimate guide for parents navigating the challenging yet rewarding journey of raising teenagers. Join your host Christina as she dives deep into the world of adolescence, tackling everything from academic pressures and social dynamics to mental health and independence. So please, welcome the host of Kicking Your Teen's Troubles to the Curb, Christina Nation.
Good morning and welcome to Kick Your Teen's Troubles to the Curb. I'm your host, Christina Nation, and we are streaming on Bold Brave TV. Today, I'm super excited for my guest, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce her. We have today Dr. Louise Lockhart. She is a vibrant pediatric psychologist, a parent coach, and a national speaker based in San Antonio, Texas, with a flair for making complex topics accessible and engaging. With over 18 years of experience, she's a go-to expert on ADHD, executive functioning, anxiety, and highly sensitive kids. Passionate about helping overwhelmed parents get on the same page, Dr. Lockhart combines her professional expertise with a warm, approachable style. When she's not empowering families, she's an adventurous author, business owner, and a lover of movies, music, and nature, always ready to share a laugh and a helpful tip. Well, welcome.
Thank you, Christina. I'm so happy to be here.
Wonderful. I'm excited. So we have lots of, great topic to talk about today and talking about, parenting our teens who are struggling with ADHD or, maybe they're not struggling, but maybe the parents are struggling. So to start off today, what are some of those common signs of ADHD that parents might overlook in their teens, especially as they grow older?
Yes. So I love this question because it's something that can be overlooked often because ADHD can look like a lot of things and get mistaken for things. So I think some things to parents, well, first of all, let's start with what ADHD is, and then we can talk about like what it's not. So ADHD is an executive functioning dysregulation disorder. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder, which means it's brain-based. So when we are born, all of our lobes of our brain are fully grown and developed, except our frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe is in the front part of our brain, which is behind our forehead. And that one doesn't stop growing until about mid 20s, maybe late 20s. And that is part of what helps with executive functioning. It helps us to execute functions like planning, organization, making good decisions, being aware of how you come across to others, your personality, how quickly you process information, your memory, time management. It's a lot of stuff that parents expect
Right.
to be able to know how to do. So with ADHD, with executive functioning and the frontal lobe, nobody's brain is fully grown and developed until their mid 20s. So then they have this underdeveloped frontal lobe. But with ADHD, then that part of their brain is also underactive. It's not being stimulated. It's not taking initiative like it needs to. So they have this double whammy when you have a teenager with ADHD. So now they have an underactive and an underdeveloped frontal lobe. So,
Right.
and not every ADHDer looks the same. So they might be very neat, but have a hard time with starting tasks, or they might takes a lot of initiative, but have a hard time making and keeping friends. So, or they're very forgetful. So they have all these different kinds of things that could be showing up. So some of the things that often get overlooked is because ADHD can look like a lot of things. When you have all these executive functions showing up, I mean, it could look like anything. So many times a teenager it might look like anxiety because they're focusing on the wrong thing, and they're hyper focusing on something, which means that they're spending so much time reading and then they forget to do their homework, or they're very inattentive so that they're kind of like distracted by everything. But you also might have someone who has a hard time starting things and engaging in tasks. So, like starting something like cleaning their room, starting their homework, starting that assignment, cooking a meal, going out with friends. It can also look like depression because it's hard for them to start initiating. And a lot of depression is also looks very similar. It can look like a learning challenge like dyslexia or dysgraphia, where they're mixing things up or they're not able to articulate things in writing. It can also, trauma can look like ADHD because it affects their brain. So there's just a whole list of things that can be showing up. So you might see a kid who procrastinates a lot. You might see a kid who is very disorganized, very messy, or seems very unmotivated for things, or has a shift in their personality and mood when they hit their teenage years. And so all of these things are very common in the teenage years, but it's just the volume is turned way up when they also have ADHD on top of that.
Right, right. I see. So if a parent, let's say they haven't had a diagnosis, and a parent is noticing these challenges, how should, be their first step in getting some support?
So I think one of the first steps is asking the teenager, like, I noticed that you have a hard time starting your homework. I get it. Like homework, you're in school all day. The last thing you want to do is start homework. Like I think you connect with them in a realistic, validating way, and and then ask them, do you notice that? Like be curious and use a lot of I notice and stay away from the judgy language and the long lectures. And well, what you need to do is if you just had the motivation, like stay away from all that and just be very curious and ask them, like, do you notice that? Or, I noticed that it's really your backpack looks like something exploded and you have a hard time finding things and you can never find the things that you need. Do you get feedback about that or do you notice that as well? Is it
Right.
hard for you to keep your room clean? Is it hard for you to get dressed in the morning because you can't find the one top that you're always looking for? And just kind of asking them if they notice, because the thing when people say, well, all kids have a little ADHD. No, no, they do not. So that is not true. So I think we have to look at when is it that you just have a messy kid versus when it becomes impairing, when there's an impairment that's being caused. It's one thing to be a little messy, and it's another thing to look like, I mean, like you've cleaned the whole room and within 10 minutes it's already disorganized again. Like, is there an impairment going on in one of these areas of functioning when it comes to their executive function? So I think you start by just asking them. And then talk to their pediatricians who should hopefully know them because they've been following them since they were a baby, and letting them know, like, hey, these are the things that we've seen pop up that are causing concerns for my teen as well as for me. Can we do a screener? And many pediatricians can do a screener. What I don't want parents to do is just stop there, because there are some pediatricians who will do a screener and then they diagnose. And that's not the best way because, like I said earlier, to me, I see it as a rule out diagnosis because so many things look like ADHD. So you
Right.
do a screener, do a check, see what is popping up, like, ooh, this looks like a concern, and then ask for a referral for testing. You can start at the school. Many schools will do the testing. Ideally, then seeing someone in the private sector who's a child psychologist or a neuropsychologist who can do testing for
Mm.
ADHD. So that way they can rule out, okay, it's not anxiety, it's not depression, it's not a learning challenge, it's not trauma, it's not, all these different things. Like, let's rule out these things and then say, okay, based on all this, what can we rule in as a possible issue for ADHD?
Right,
So I
right.
would say,
Yeah,
yes, start with the kid, then the pediatrician, and then go for the testing. So that way you can really
yeah,
get all the information that you need.
yeah. And is it possible that sometimes you might even have a couple of things going on? There might be some comorbidity, like, you know, depression and ADHD, like you said. Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. There's the comorbid or co-occurring diagnoses, and it is very possible that it's not just this neat little picture of, oh, it's just ADHD. It could be ADHD and anxiety. It could be ADHD and dyslexia. It could be ADHD and autism. I mean, it could be a couple of diagnoses, two or more diagnoses that are going on. I think what we want to make sure that doesn't happen is that sometimes I see teenagers coming into my practice and they have like this long laundry list of diagnoses when certain other ones could have better explained many of the symptoms. Two diagnoses could have better explained the symptoms. And so we don't want to have all these diagnoses slapped on your kid when maybe something else more simpler could better explain what's going on, because we want to pay attention to, does this cause impairment? Is there a functioning issue going on based on this diagnosis? Because when it
Yeah.
comes down to it, there are several types of ADHD underneath that. So we want to look at ADHD inattentive type. Is that what's going on? ADHD hyperactive impulsive type, or an ADHD combined type. And many times that diagnosis by itself can better explain it. Or you might have, like we mentioned earlier, the ADHD and anxiety might be the issue, for example.
Right, right. And then, so for some parents who may not be sure that they want a diagnosis, or some might feel like it's a label, what would you say to that? Do you think that there's benefits in getting the actual diagnoses, or?
Yes and no. I mean, I feel like there's pushback when it comes to psychological diagnoses. I still feel like although we've come a long way with mental health and this stigma around a diagnosis and medication and treatment and therapy, I still feel like there's still this bias. Because
Mhm.
what's the problem with getting a diagnosis? Like, why are we calling it a label? When your kid has diabetes, we're not saying, oh, I don't want to label him. You want to get the diagnosis so that you can get the proper treatment and the medication and whatever else, proper nutrition. Your kid has cancer, or they have migraines, or they have pain. Like, we're not looking at it as a label. We want to make sure we get the proper diagnosis so we can get the proper treatment, right? And so I think we need to move away from thinking about it that way, because when I hear that type of question from parents, it's often because there's some kind of bias or stigma that's still there. And I
Right.
get it. I get it. Many families have been burned by that. There's cultural significance behind it. There's all kinds of historical things in terms of unethical treatments that have been done. I totally get it.
Mhm.
And I totally understand it. But I also think then if you know that you have your kid's best interest in mind, and you know you want to help them succeed, and sometimes that diagnosis can help them succeed because now you have an explanation for what is going on, and then you can have the proper intervention based on that. Because if for example, they have ADHD and dyslexia, then you want to get them maybe a tutor, get them further resources, get them special education, get them 504 or accommodations or individual educational plan. Like, that will help you get to that. And in some school districts, you can't even get those services unless you have a diagnosis. So
Right.
I believe that those can be very helpful. And then that way your kid understands, like, well, no, I'm not stupid. I'm not dumb. There's nothing wrong with me. That this is an executive function issue, or this is a learning challenge, or this is a mood disorder. Like, it helps them to better understand themselves rather than feeling
Yeah.
like they're alone and suffering.
Right. That's what I've heard from some teens, that getting that diagnosis really made them help them to feel like you said, that they're not stupid, or they're not, but that there is something going on, and it made them feel a lot more empowered to be able to deal with it. So, yeah, I love that. And so you did talk about a lot of times, like, that ADHD diagnosis means that it is impairing function, right? So, what are some of how can ADHD affect a teen's school performance, friendships, family relationships during these pivotal years?
Yeah. So one of the things that has been shown from the research is kids with ADHD are about 30% developmentally younger than their same aged peers. So
Mm,
it doesn't mean that they're less intelligent, because you can have a high IQ and have ADHD. So it has nothing to do with intelligence, but socially and developmentally, they're about 2 to 3 years younger than their same age peers. And what that means is that if you have a 15-year-old, then they might be acting more like a 12 or 13-year-old in terms of behavioral expectations and maturity. And so the things that you expect a 15-year-old to be able to do, like cook your own meal or get your driver's permit or different things like that, they may not developmentally be able to do it yet because they're really immature. And so you might find that your teenager with ADHD has a preference for younger peers because they feel younger, or they may have interests that are more in line with a younger kid. Um, and you might see issues, for example, with like bedwetting till later in years, because that's a self-control regulation issue. And so that
Mhm.
you might see some of those kinds of things. I think that's often not spoken about. I see a lot of ADHD kids who are wetting the bed longer than what's normal, and what's typical for their developmental stage. You might see a lot of ADHD teen who just doesn't want to do homework. Anything that requires mental effort and sustained effort, so like reading novels, especially things like math, they just don't want to do it because it's like, oh, it takes so much effort. Writing a report, reading a book, doing a book report, doing a project, unless it's something that's new, novel, enjoyable, part of their interests, a lot of times they're just like, they take a shortcut or they just choose not to do it. So motivation is a big part because that's task initiation, which is an executive function skill. And many times, if it feels like it's going to take too much work, or there doesn't seem to be any immediate payoff, or it just feels like busy work, they will procrastinate, they will delay, they will lie, they will find some kind of hack or shortcut. And then you'll see a suffering in terms of their grades. Um, when it comes to friendships, many times ADHD kids can make friends pretty easily because they're fun, they have a lot of energy, they're the life of the party, they're impulsive. But those same traits can also make it hard for them to maintain friendships because
Mm.
they are impulsive, so they're interrupting people's conversations. They're playing a game and they don't know how to wait their turn because they're kind of jumping to their turn, or they're forgetting important information that a friend is telling them because they're not fully attending to the information. Or they forget to text their friends because out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
um, or they overdo the texting where they're sending so many messages, so many emojis. They say things out of turn. They say things that are rude, insulting, or inappropriate in a text chain. And then they realize, oh, I probably shouldn't have said that about my friend. So the friendship issue tends to be a big issue for them. They make a lot of friends pretty quickly, but it's the maintaining of the friendships that can be a problem. And then in the home, you might see problems with sibling relationships and teen parent relationships because they're like this whirlwind. So they can sometimes be very rigid or inflexible. So things have to be a
Mm.
certain way because flexibility is another executive function skill. And so you have to prepare the chicken nuggets a certain way, or we eat at this certain time, or we always do this on Saturday nights as a family, or we always go this way to school. And so then if you want to mix things up and make things kind of exciting, sometimes they can push back because they're like, no, that's not the way we do it. That's not the way we cook it. That's not the way you cut it. And it can cause a lot of tension in the home because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So something you talked about earlier with the school performance. I was a behavior specialist, so I worked with lots of kiddos who had ADHD. And one thing that I heard from parents is like, well, I don't understand how they have ADHD because when it comes to dinosaurs, they have a lot of attention. Or when it comes to, whatever their favorite thing is, they're able to, pay attention and attend to and get the work done. But when it's homework, they don't. So what would you say to that?
I hear that all the time. Well, that's because
Mhm.
dinosaurs are interesting to them. That's their jam.
Mhm.
That's their interest. And so it's interesting, it's novel, it's cool, it's part of who they are. So yeah, I mean, like anybody, if we are interested in something, we dedicate more time, effort, research, and everything to it because it embodies who we are, it's something that we value. But the thing with ADHD is for these teens, that interest is turned up. So that's where the hyper focus comes in. And people often misinterpret, oh, if someone has ADHD, that means they can't pay attention. No, ADHD is along a continuum. So there can be lots of inattention where they can't even focus to save their life, or it could be hyper focus where they over focus on something to the point where they forget to do everything else and they're only interested in that thing. So there's a continuum in terms of that. So yeah, I mean, of course, if they're interested in dinosaurs, they want to do that, and homework sucks, so I don't want to do that. So yeah, that makes total sense to me. Now, if homework is about dinosaurs and they integrate an interest into something that they enjoy, then you'll probably see them rock it out. So
Right.
it's really about finding their strengths and what are some creative ways that you can integrate those strengths into that. So that way it can be interesting and fun for them, and you can use their strengths to battle their weaknesses, and you can get them to like light a fire on themselves. So yeah, that is very common. If it's something that is
Yeah.
of interest to them, they will totally be engaged. But if not, then good luck.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that explanation. So you mentioned how teens with ADHD struggle with executive functioning. So how can parents help their teens, um, with things like time management, organization, and planning?
Yes. So, what I would encourage parents to do is whether they have a diagnosis or not, if you know that there's an executive function challenge, because by the way, you can have executive function challenges, but not have ADHD. But if you have
Mhm.
ADHD, you have executive function challenges. But
Right.
because there are so many of them, then it's important to find out, well, where are their areas of strength so that you can really continue to encourage and build those up? And then where are their areas of weakness so that you can say, okay, let's tackle these and provide specific interventions for them. So, for example, if task initiation, so starting something, and time management, which is very common for these individuals, because they tend to have a lot of time blindness. They tend to over or underestimate how long something will take. Oh, I don't want to do the laundry or the dishes because it takes forever,
Yeah.
or I don't want to read my book because it's so lame and I don't want to do this. I don't want to, it's so dumb. Whatever, like they say all these kinds of things and they use this language. And so it's about kind of determining where are those areas. You could look them up, look at the checklist of those things. So if it's task initiation and time management, for example, one of the things that I love, and this is whether you have a challenge or the ADHD, but in this area, is the Pomodoro. And the
Mm.
Pomodoro, it means tomato in Italian. There are great apps you can find on your phone and download them. It looks like a tomato and you can just download it. And it's a timer. And it doesn't work for every ADHDer, but for a lot of them, I find that it is very effective. And what this does is that why it helps with time management and task initiation, it's because this timer, what you do is you set it and you say, okay, for 20 or 25 minutes, I'm going to do this thing. And then I would take I think it's like a 3 minute break. And then you work for another 20 minutes, 3 minute break. And
Right.
why that works is because a lot of time perception for ADHD brain is now, not now. So if something is due now, then I better do it quick, which is why like, oh, snap, this paper's due at midnight. And then at like 11:30, they do their best work. Or a friend is coming
Right.
over, I better clean up my room. They're going to be here in 20 minutes. Like they do their best work because that sense of urgency is the now. But the paper's not due for another month. It ain't due. So that not now makes them procrastinate and put it off again to the last minute till it's due now. So what the
Mhm.
Pomodoro does is that it creates this sense of artificial urgency that I am doing this
Mhm.
math homework or this reading assignment or this paper or whatever it is in this 20-minute time period, and I don't do anything else. I don't check texts, I don't look at Instagram, I don't do the latest TikTok trend, I don't do anything but that thing. And what that
Mhm.
does is that now it creates this hyper focus. It creates this task initiation. Ooh, because the timer just started. Let me do this quick. And you also know there's a break coming, but you don't want the break to be too long because if the break is too long, then they're going to get distracted and lost in that next task. So taking
Right.
a 3 minute break is just long enough for them to get up, stretch, run around the house, check those text messages real quick. Oh, look at that cool new TikTok. It's 20 seconds long. Okay, now it's ding, and now another 20 minutes of reading or whatever else you
Mhm.
do. So that is an excellent way of getting them to kind of focus and do the thing that they need to do. If the timer creates too much anxiety, which is often the case for people with anxiety and ADHD, or they just have this perfectionism time pressure, rather than having a timer, I just make it more in terms of creating a goal. So you have to do 30 math problems, then do 10, take a quick break, then do another
Yeah.
10. You have 50 pages to read over the weekend, read 5 pages every whatever, just break it up and just chunking. So chunking is another great resource and intervention rather than just the timer. If the timer creates too much, like, oh, that's too much. So those are really, really good ones. So I think anything that can create using that weakness as a strength and making it very helpful for them can be very, very, very effective. So Pomodoro and chunking are two of my most favorite ones, and it's really helpful. And it's also helpful for those of us who have a hard time with something that's a big task. For me, when I just parenting tweens and teens, and the way that I wrote it in 9 months, and the way that I did that was from the Pomodoro, honestly. And I would
Yeah.
have blocks of time. I did the chunking in the Pomodoro. So I had blocks of time where I would write, break. And then after the fourth cycle, I would take a little bit longer break for like 15 minutes and then go
Yeah.
back. And I was able to get a lot done. So it can be very effective.
Yeah, I love that. We actually use that in the schools with our kiddos as well, and it was very effective. But I didn't know all of the reason of why it was so effective behind it. So thank you for sharing
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, you're
And
welcome.
speaking of breaks, we do need to take a quick break here. So we're going to take a quick sponsor break and we'll be right back. And you are watching Kick Your Teens Troubles to the Curb with Christina Nation. And we have Louise Lockhart, and we'll be right back.
Mike Zoric, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zoric, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zoric has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Hello, and welcome back to Kick Your Teens Troubles to the Curb. I'm your host, Christina Nation. We are streaming live with Bold Brave TV, and today we have my guest, Dr. Louise Lockhart, and we are having a great conversation about supporting our teens with ADHD. So thank you so much for being here, Anne Louise.
Thanks for having
Oh,
me.
yeah, so we had I loved, your how you were talking about some different interventions that are helpful for teens who struggle with time management and task initiation. I too have found it to be very helpful. And like you said, even for yourself, right? Even if you don't struggle with ADHD, it can still be very helpful tool. So wonderful. So another thing that I hear that comes up a lot with teens who are struggling with ADHD is their emotion regulation. So many, so what role does emotion regulation play in teens with ADHD, and how can parents help their teens manage those big emotions like frustration or overwhelm?
Yeah, that's a hard one because that in our diagnostic manual for psychiatry and psychology, the ADHD diagnosis is not, it focuses a lot on behavior and very little on emotions. And
Mhm.
many people, many professionals feel like there needs to be an emotional regulation piece because it's such an issue for so many teens with ADHD. And so I think that's missing, unfortunately. I think more and more practitioners are realizing it's an issue and they do a lot of interventions for that. But the emotional regulation piece is important because how I explain it is because ADHD is a dysregulation disorder, everything is dysregulated on some level. Maybe their learning, or most things. Their learning, their memory, um, their behaviors, their academics, their feelings. And one of the things that I think we have to keep in mind, and it's something that I didn't learn until several years ago, is one of our senses, which is called interoception. It's the way we experience things within our body. And interoception tells us like when we're hungry, when we're full, when we've eaten something bad, and we have to go to the bathroom. But it's also helps us in terms of our emotions. So when we feel lonely or awkward or embarrassed or not quite right or off in some way or humiliated. And when you're thinking about teenagers, like this is all brand new territory. Like they're learning about emotions as they become mature young teenagers. But for many of them, if they have ADHD, whether diagnosed or undiagnosed, especially if it's undiagnosed and it's present, they may not understand why they have such issues with emotions and why they freak out over something so small. And many parents are like, dude, it's not a big deal. Like, we weren't able to go to the park today, like we promised, because it's thunderstorming outside. Like, it's not a big deal. It's like, no, it is a big deal because flexibility, which is an executive function skill, if they lack that, it could make them overly inflexible and not adaptive to things that happen because they get so stuck. I call them often like sticky kids. They're so sticky. They get so stuck in what's supposed to be fair or what's supposed to happen, and they don't know how to adapt. And so when you see a lot of this, they'll have these emotions and it'll feel like rage. And this is often why one of the things that ADHD kids tend to get misdiagnosed with is bipolar disorder, because it seems to go from 0 to 60 and you're like, oh my gosh, you're so bipolar. And it's like, that is not bipolar. That is not how that works. It doesn't just happen because they don't get a candy like they wanted. It's this dysregulation. That's what's happening. And because they feel this surge of emotions, and it's a regulation issue, and emotions are so abstract, it's not something that you can touch and pinpoint and sometimes even express. So you'll see these kind of explosions of emotions. And so
Right.
I think that's important to educate your teen on that. Like if you see that, that's something that pops up, which often, I mean, I can't think of a situation where I've met with a teen and emotional regulation has not been an issue, actually. So I think it's important to explain to them what's going on. You know, we know that we've been diagnosed with ADHD. It's not just about squirrel, like it's more than just that. It's about and explaining. It's about your executive function, that your brain is still growing, but it's underactive. It's not developing in the same way as other kids. Doesn't mean there's something wrong with your brain. It just means your brain needs more help. It needs more guidelines and support. And one of the things that often shows up is your emotions. Your emotions sometimes feel like they're out of whack. Like you feel happy one moment and all of a sudden you're raging, or you feel sad and then you feel really happy. Like that's pretty common. And so you normalize it for them and help them to know that, yeah, this makes sense given the diagnosis and given what's going on. Your brain is trying to balance things out. And so one of the best ways to do that is and this is hard, I'm going to admit this, in the from the get-go, is for the parents to be co-regulated, which means
Mm-hmm.
you have to be calm first. And it is
Mm-hmm.
really hard to parent an ADHD teen. We need to just say that from it kind of like right out in the front, because there requires a different set of skills, parenting skills, when you're parenting a kid with ADHD. They're not neurotypical, so they're not going to do things in the way that other kids who are typically developing are going to do. And so it requires so much more patience, so much more understanding, and to be able to, not saying that you're coddling them and giving in, but you have to be aware of what sets them off and what does not, so that you can anticipate those things. And the co-regulation piece is that you're basically lending them your calm. So you know that
Mm-hmm.
this, whatever triggers them, you take a deep breath so that their dysregulation doesn't trigger your nervous system, which will happen. You'll feel
Mm-hmm.
your blood pressure rise, your breathing gets shallow, you feel like you're turning all kinds of colors, your throat, your stuff is in your throat, like you just feel like you want to yell and scream and go off and escape
Mm-hmm.
and run away. And what they need and what you need in that moment is to offer co-regulation. So that's where you take a deep breath. You say, wow, this is really irritating. This is not what I signed up for. Parenting sucks. Okay, get that out of the way. You take a breath. This is very typical for an ADHD teen. It is very annoying, very frustrating, but it is very common. All right, good. I got that out of the way. What does my teen need from me? They need from me to be calm. Do I want to be calm? Heck no. But I know this is what they need. So I'm going to take a deep breath, get myself centered. If I need to take a break, drink water, eat something sour, chew on ice, whatever it is I need to do to calm my regulation, calm my nervous system and get it back in check. And then you connect with your teen. I know that it's frustrating to have to do your homework when it's the last thing that you want to do. That makes sense to me. How can I support you? Because it seems like you're feeling really agitated and frustrated. How can I support you as you get through this? And so that you do that collaborative problem solving with them, because problem solving, surprise, surprise, is another executive function skill. And many times,
Mm-hmm.
ADHD kid who's very dysregulated, even looking like they may have some oppositional behaviors or defiant behaviors, then you want to look into helping them with problem solving. That's one of the best ways to help regulate them, because many times they see a problem and that's all they see. So you want to help them to know that both problems have solutions. It's not the end of the world, and I'm here to support you. And so that
Right.
co-regulation is one of the best tools that we have as parents. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so hard to do, but it's what our
Mm-hmm.
teens need. It really is what they need. They
Yeah.
don't need you freaking out while they're freaking out.
Right, right. I love that. And same thing as a behavior specialist, we spend a lot of our time doing de-escalation training for our teachers and for our parents, and learning how to best de-escalate when there are a lot of big emotions going on. And co-regulation is so important. So I heard you say, first that you want to educate, and then you want to normalize, and then when you're co-regulating, like you said, first, it starts with us, right? And modeling what that looks like, and then so doing it for ourselves, bringing ourselves to center, taking that break that we need. So not only are we centering ourselves, but we're also modeling that for our teen, and then co-regulating together by, like one of the examples I give is using the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? So asking your teen, what's 5 things that you see right now? What's 4 things you hear? And just doing that together, right? Is a great way to co-regulate. And then validating those feelings is what I'm hearing you say too, that when you come back down to calm, then you can validate those feelings. And then when both are calm, then you can start to problem solve and use that collaborative problem solving. Because like you said, if they're struggling with ADHD, then they struggle with that problem solving piece. So it's something that you can collaboratively work through the steps of problem solving. So I love
Absolutely.
that.
And I
Yeah.
think also, Christina, what's important to mention is the way our brain works. Our brain processes emotions and our thoughts, like problem solving, logical reasoning, being able to be reasonable. And but when our limbic system, which is responsible for emotions, when our limbic system is firing on all cylinders for positive and not so positive or uncomfortable emotions, that is all we're going to pay attention to. And this is not just for teenagers, this is for all ages. Okay.
Yeah.
When we are feeling really happy, that's why you see teens who are like in a car with a bunch of other teens and they're feeling good and they're speeding on the road. They're making a dumb decision. Do they logically know I shouldn't be speeding or drinking or, whatever? Yeah, they know that. They know what they're supposed to do, but that's reasoning. Their limbic system is like, woohoo, this is the time of my life. But it's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing when things are negative or feeling uncomfortable, like having to do dumb homework or cleaning my room or the chores that I got to do or the million other things that we ask teens to do that they don't want to do that feels taxing to them. Their emotions are like, I'm bored, I'm frustrated, I'm angry. And so they're not going to be thinking through reasonably, oh, well, I should just take a breath and I can just do the steps and I'll institute the Pomodoro and then I'll get it done. Like that requires logical reasoning. And when their limbic system is firing, they're not going to think through the problems. So when you lecture them and you're yelling at them and you take away their phone and you do all these things, and so now you're dysregulated and now you've escalated your teen, they're not going to engage in problem solving and they definitely don't want to talk with you because now everybody's limbic system is firing and everybody's emotional, so they're not going to be able to think through problem solving because that requires rational thinking, which requires a
Right.
calm mind. So the why the co-regulation is so important is not that you're making your teen soft, it's not that you're giving in, it's not any of that stuff. It's because they need that in order to think through what to do next, because we're never in a good state of mind to make good decisions when we're feeling stressed. We have to
Right.
bring in the calm first, so that way you can bring your brain back online to make better decisions. And that's for
Right.
anything, like anything, doing your taxes, being late for your flight, whatever it is, you have to calm yourself so that you can, like, okay, what can I do? And then you can make a good decision. So that's why that co-regulation piece is so important. It's not about raising a soft kid. It's about raising a kid who actually knows how to make good decisions that are sound because they know how to calm themselves.
Right. And that's one thing that I like working with parents about too is like you mentioned some of those triggers. So when you can sit down with your teen and talk about what are some of those triggers, like doing homework might be a
Yes.
trigger, having to clean your room might be a trigger. So, writing down what those triggers are and then writing down what are some of those coping skills that are helpful in those moments. So they're, thinking ahead of time, if I'm triggered and I'm feeling escalated, if I'm feeling these big emotions coming up, what helps me to get back down to calm? So maybe it's listening to music, maybe it's doodling, maybe it's drinking some water or going for a walk or right, but
Right.
having those kind of laid out, and then the parent can say, when they're noticing that stuff come up, say, would it be helpful if we took a walk? Would it be helpful if I got you some water? And you can use that as well to co-regulate, right?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's why that validation works so well too, because what that's co-regulating. You're telling your teen, it makes sense that you feel frustrated by blank. It makes sense that you made this decision, whether it's a good decision or not. Like it makes sense. Like that helps them to feel understood, because if teens feel like they have to prove to you um, why they did what they did and that they don't feel like you're hearing them, that's why you see the escalation. You need to be able to communicate that, oh yeah, what you did makes sense. That makes sense to me that you did blank, good or bad decision, that you get it, even if you don't agree with it.
Right, right. Yeah. And so we've been talking a lot about how to co-regulate together, but on the other side, teens often want independence, right? So
Yes.
an ADHD can make it harder to be self-reliant. So how can parents encourage independence without setting their teen up for failure?
Yeah, that's a great question. For teenage years, one of the biggest developmental stages is autonomy and independence. Teens desire to be their own person, to feel like they are separate from the people that are raising them, that they're their own individual. And that's why you see a lot of rebelliousness, because it's not that they hate you, it's that they're trying to be their own person. They want to say that these values, these beliefs, the way that I dress and think, and what I want to do in my career and my job, like the things that I like, the friends that I have, like these are my decisions. And yes, you've raised me and you've instilled these values and beliefs and ideals, but I want to feel like they are coming from me. I want to know that this is what I believe in. And so I think, again, it's about validating that. So sometimes teens will say things to parents to get a rise out of you, and they do it well because then you give right into it. And I think it's about,
Mhm.
like, I remember during the pandemic when our kids were homeschooled for a little bit, and preteen, and they had said at one point, I think we should never have to go back to school ever again. And it would be easy as a parent to say, oh, that's ridiculous, you'd be stupid, and then you would, wouldn't mount to anything, and that's a ridiculous thing to say. Like, we could have this whole long lecture, and instead I'll be like, huh, that's an interesting prospect, tell me more. And then they were like,
Mhm.
well then, and then they started telling me like what that would look like if they never went back to school again, and how if they only did homeschooling 2 days a week, and then they only they like minimal schooling. And as they were speaking, they realized how ridiculous that would be, how they would not have the skills they need, how they wouldn't be knowledgeable and have enough wisdom and information to be able to make it in this life. And they convinced themselves that was a bad idea. So
Yeah.
again, when we can be curious and say, tell me more about that. That's interesting. What we're doing is we're helping our teen practice critical thinking, which is part of being independent. That I can come up with my
Mhm.
own thinking, that I can come up with my own framework. Even the way they dress, if you don't agree with their style, well, who cares? Like, we all have, I mean, I think we forget that we used to be teens. I think adults really
Right.
forget that sometimes, right? Like, I'm sure you wore some really ridiculous things back in your day, um, or the style,
Right.
because it was the trend, even though you don't get it, or the music they listen to that you don't understand. And rather than lecturing them about it, be interested in what they're interested in. Just say, hey, I noticed that you've been listening to whatever artist a lot. What do you like about them? Tell me, let's listen to a song together. Let's watch a music video together. Um, or, hey, I've been hearing this song is trending. Like, oh, I didn't know about that. Or, oh, you like this show, or you like this thing. Like, that part of that is helping them understand that, yeah, I am my own person. I'm an independent person. My parent is interested in things I'm interested in. All of that does develop independence because it helps them to be their own self, and that they don't have to push and claw their way to be this independent self. They see that their parent is going alongside them, supporting them, or understanding, or seeking to understand, even if you don't get it.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I think that's helpful because again, you will see more of the rebellion if you try to squash it too soon before
Mhm.
understanding it. And that's with
Right.
anything. Their friends that you don't like, their style that they wear that you don't enjoy, their belief system, what they value, any of that stuff. You start with curiosity and find out more about why it is that they like what they like or don't like what they don't like, versus trying to convince them. And that helps to build independence because it helps to build independent thinking.
Yeah, I love that. Wonderful. This has been such a great conversation. Please tell our viewers how they can learn more about how to connect with you, work with you. And I heard you mention a new book. So tell us
Yes,
about it.
yes. So again, my name is Dr. Louise Lockhart. They can find me. I have a practice in San Antonio called A New Day Pediatric Psychology. So they can find me online at anewdaysa.com. They can also find me on Instagram. I'm very active at dr.annlouise.lockhart. I have lots of tools and resources for parents. And yes, I have a book coming out October 28th, 2025, called Love the Teen You Have. And it's for parents of tweens and teens 9 to 19 to help them move from chaos to connection. So I'm very proud of this, and I'm excited. So look out for that. Join my email community, and that way you can find out as soon as it drops.
Yes, I'm so excited. I'll definitely have to grab a copy.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And for my viewers, also, if you haven't grabbed my book yet, I got The Power of Everyday Grace, Parenting Teens with Depression. And you can find that in the companion workbook that goes with it on Amazon. So look out for that. And also, if you are concerned that your teen might be struggling with teen, then you want to grab my 10 ways to distinguish between teen depression or typical teenage phase and teen depression. And you can find that at my website, empoweredparenting.family. So thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This has been Kicking Your Teen's Troubles to the Curb with host Christina Nation. Tune in each week as Christina features expert interviews, real-life stories, and practical strategies that empower parents to connect with their teens and effectively address their struggles. Here, Tuesdays, 11 a.m. Eastern, on the Bold Brave TV network, powered by B2 Studios.